So, seems like we're live. Let's wait a moment for people to come in. Yeah, it will switch. So, welcome to the first edition of my podcast in live stream format. And I'm still getting used to handling all the interfaces. So bear with me that the ride is not yet that smooth. I hope the music in the background is not too loud. If so, please mention that in chat. And we are going to go through the topics of the day. Let me see. I think I have to go. Yeah. That works better. So, the topics of the day that I will be discussing in the podcast recording will be the ones listed here. So, we're going to talk about Facebook becoming Meta and the whole discussion regarding is Linux ready to be used by the average consumer. Then, after Alder Lake launched early this month, we're going to talk about some controversy regarding DRM and Windows 11 and but also Windows 10. But for me, it's mostly Windows 11. And yeah, then the next hot topic is Valve's announcement to delay the Steam Deck due to component shortages. And we're closing up the podcast with the topics of two developer conferences this week. The first one is for .NET Conf 2021, which Microsoft held from Tuesday till Thursday of this week. And we're closing off with yesterday's Steamworks Steam Deck Developer Conference or Developer Stream. Okay. So, sadly, no one else in yet. So, I guess I will go straight to the podcast recording. Oh, yeah, and by the way, of course, small disclaimer ahead. All the opinions that I'm expressing here during the stream and, of course, the podcast itself, these are all my personal opinions, and they are not influenced by anyone else, and they are not related to any affiliate parties of mine, like my place of work, friends, or family. So that's just my usual disclaimer for these type of shows. And yeah. Then let's get into the topics at hand. I'm pausing the music for the podcast recording because doing the podcast itself, it's when you listen on it just via audio, it's much nicer just to have the audio and not only the and no disturbing music. Hi, Coben. How are you doing tonight? Lazy Sunday. I can imagine that. Yeah, I was not expecting to actually start the podcast series. Do that. I was not expecting to start the podcast series this weekend, but appointments have shifted. So here we are today with me starting the live podcast. Okay, then I am going to go into the topics and into the actual recording. So bear with me. Quickly switching seats. Yeah, again, first time. I already did some earlier podcast recordings earlier in the year, and they're all on the typical podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Spreaker, and so on and so forth. Of course, they are also on YouTube as video podcasts. So yeah, and basically what the recording of today, I will definitely play. They will definitely be played on the on YouTube as well. So I will cut basically the stream chatting portions out of it and focus on the recording itself. So, and thank you for the host. Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the first live recorded edition of the BNO Techcast. And yeah, new format, also new set not really location, but I have a slightly different setup, new camera angle. So, and I have some current news topics that I want to discuss during today's show. And these topics are basically the whole controversy of Facebook becoming Meta. Then what's also currently going around in social media quite heavily is the whole discussion, is Linux ready to be for every not for every is Linux ready for the average consumer? Huge discussion at the moment. And then also from this week we have the whole debacle with the new Intel Alder Lake CPUs and game compatibility, especially with modern game launchers and DRM for multiplayer titles. Then, of course, we have the next topic that will be the delay of Valve's Steam Deck. And last but not least, we will have two developer-centric topics. That is Microsoft's .NET Conf 2021 that happened this week from Tuesday till Thursday. Really massive live stream event, almost 3 full days of streams. So lots of material over on YouTube. And yeah, we are closing off the whole show with the developer conference from Valve on the Steam Deck. Yeah. So let's dive directly into it. So yeah, we are right now on my show notes for today. So this is my blog. So if you want to follow along, for everyone who is listening, the location of my blog is bnonet.com. And besides, of course, all the announcements for the podcasts, I have also some written articles on here, also some guides and some announcements in regards to projects that I have been working on lately. So, yeah, but we are now going to the first topic page. So I grabbed this article from Road to VR, which is actually just also their tease to their podcast. Or I don't really know if it's their podcast, but I found the title pretty matching. And yeah, Facebook, in its glorious wisdom, decided to rename itself to Meta because they seem to have developed a new vision for themselves to create a metaverse, as they are calling it. And it's quite interesting when you compare the concepts that they're talking about to some stuff that you find in science fiction. And that really has spawned a controversy now where a lot of people are saying that Facebook or Meta, I have to get used to that myself, is basically creating an environment that is more like, creating a dystopian future, let's say. And because when you listen to their talks, it's really sounding like, people buy our cheap virtual reality headsets, and you will be able to go places where you will not be able to go anymore in the future, thanks to dramatically higher prices of flight tickets and so on and so forth. And that, of course, that's not the only thing, but especially when you also consider all the data that again will be associated with it, with being more on this virtual platform. As a lot of commentators have said, for virtual reality and augmented reality, so the whole XR space, this announcement, this step is huge, but let's see what the implementation is going to be. So this is very, very interesting. So that's at least my take on that situation. Then we go over to the whole discussion in regards to Linux. I'm just opening Gaming on Linux for reference here. It's since this is more general, more general discussion. We had also on some friends' streams a lot of discussions on this topic in the past few days and weeks. And in social media, you had, of course, the Linux challenge from Linus Tech Tips that they started, and recently also a video by Epos Vox, if I remember correctly. And every one of them basically ran into stumbling blocks during their experiences. And the whole discussion in regards to is Linux ready for the average consumer really was spawned thanks to Valve announcing that they're going to release the Steam Deck based on Linux. And as a preamble, from my perspective, I have been using multiple different operating systems over the year. I have daily driven Windows, I have daily driven Linux, I have daily driven Mac OS. So for me, overall, all of these operating systems have their advantages and disadvantages. But I myself am a developer and I am a power user. So it's hard to really say, okay, that my experiences with these platforms are equal to the experiences that a normal consumer would have. And that is really the for me, out of all these videos, the key takeaway. Because when you're going into Linux, you can definitely daily drive it, definitely, for work and play, but it really depends on your use case and the distribution you're choosing for that. And that will heavily define the experience that you will be having. Because both Linus Tech Tips and Epos Vox basically ran into issues with their specific distributions. And knowing things working on other distributions, it would have been a different possibility. But and as they, I think it was Linus Tech Tips pointed out, a huge problem at the moment is the advice for new users which distribution to choose. Sometimes you have even information in the same articles that are controversial to itself. So, for example, for Ubuntu, it says it's beginner friendly, easy to set up, and on the contrary side, it says, yeah, you have it's hard to configure. So, what? And this is something that hopefully through these kinds of discussions that are now happening, hopefully there will be articles, tutorials, or videos that will give people guidance for these kinds of choices. So that will be a huge step for making the experience for new Linux users a lot better. And of course, one point also was when you're going into gaming, it depends on your use case. There are a lot of places that you can find out which games are running well, or basically running out of the box. If your games that you want to play fall into that category, it's easy sailing. But there are also games that you have to put into some work to get them running, and there you're again very heavily dependent on the community. And if you're not familiar with the community and the technical stuff, that can be hard. But important to say, since Valve is now working on SteamOS and the whole integration with Steam for basically every game that they have on their catalog, that is something that is probably about to change, at least for games that are still actively sold on Steam. For third-party games or games that are not sold anymore on Steam, that situation will be different. And talking about Linux and we have the counterpart now. We have Windows, which Windows 11 is of course one of the big reasons why a lot of people would like to switch or would like to have an alternative. And there have been issues in the past few weeks and months, especially with AMD CPUs, and they have been remedied as far as I have seen. And now that earlier this month, Intel's Alder Lake has launched, there is now again a controversy in regards to DRM, where we are seeing again that DRM is having issues with the new CPU architecture and how the new Windows kernel is basically scheduling the different jobs and tasks to do. And there is quite a few games affected. I think what was it, 21 or something for Windows 11, and there are also games affected for Windows 10. The problem that I'm seeing with that, since Windows 10 is not going, I lost my train of thought. Sorry. My problem with this is since a lot of people are still running Windows 10 for various reasons, and the OS is still supported till I think 2025. Intel already announced, or I don't know if it was Intel or Microsoft, but it was already announced that the fixes for the Windows 10 issues will probably be handled sometime next year. So definitely forcing people again to migrate over to Windows 11, even if they don't want to, and seeing all the various other small quirks and issues, and of course the UI changes that not everyone really likes. That's not a nice strategy, I have to say. And as also other commentators have said, the usefulness of DRM is really questionable, and you in general have issues with Windows 11 and DRM because the Microsoft enabled VBS and HVCI in Windows 11 when you do a clean install. If you upgrade from Windows 10 to 11, you don't have to deal with that. But if you do a fresh install or have a new system, it's enabled by default. And that technology, or those technologies, are basically virtualization or containerization of applications in Windows, so that each application is running in its own secure container. And these DRM systems, they cannot access these protected parts. And then they're saying, yeah, there is something blocking me of verifying stuff. No, so I don't let you play the game. And the behavior of games that people have seen is very erratic. Even games with the same DRM are behaving differently. They behave differently in different systems, so it's a mess basically. So what of course would be interesting to see is, do those games, or in general, do issues like this exist on Linux with the new architecture? Because I don't know. It's a new architecture. You have, when you adopt the new architecture, you have quirks that you have to deal with, and this is one of those quirks. So this is an issue that will not be permanent. It will be resolved at some point. So yeah, but still, it would be interesting to see if some systems on the Linux side also have issues, or if it's not a problem at all because perhaps the Linux kernel already has big little architecture support baked in from the ARM compatibility or something. I am not sure there, but perhaps if someone is running Linux on a Alder Lake system, yeah, let me know in the comments or through my blog or via Twitter. And yeah. So next up, we are back basically to the Steam Deck. The Steam Valve also got hit by the worldwide shipping shortages. A lot of people have been looking forward to getting their Steam Decks in December or early next year. And yeah, when the news broke this week, it really was not a huge surprise to most. However, so the delay is not dramatic, at least at the moment. The future will tell if that remains. I just heard in another news update today that some places shipping situations are actually improving. So fingers crossed that this trend is going to continue, and the whole situation with shipping delays is not going to continue as crazy as it is in 2022. So for people who went into the registration queue for being able to order in December of this year, the order period has been shifted to the first quarter of 2022. So probably somewhere between January and March, it will be possible to start ordering the Steam Deck. Of course, it will be interesting to see what is then the actual shipping period resulting after that. So the way Valve does this is giving them a lot of options for handling that, which, from my perspective, is fine, since they're very upfront with the communication in regards to schedules and their issues. And yeah, the sad thing that I have to say for people who are in the queue for, or were in the queue for Q2 of 2022, they now don't have a firm window when they could be expecting to be able to order their Steam Deck. If you are not getting to the queue now, it already says that you will be able to order starting queue after Q2 2022. But even for people who were in the Q2 2022 slot before, they now have the same statement. So their Steam pre-order page says sometime after Q2 2022. And for people who did this pre-order earlier in this year, that's not that nice. I would have understood for that time frame for new orders, but I can't understand it for people who are already are in the queue. So having a window for these people should have been the way to go. So we're through with the different normal tech news of this week, or the last 2 weeks, and we're now going to the developer-related stuff. So the first of those was the .NET Conf this week, and even Microsoft being new to the open source community game, they're doing a lot of things right in at the moment, at least in my opinion. Of course, there was a kerfuffle about them removing the hot reload functionality, and a lot of people are still pissed about it, which I definitely can understand, because the way that they implemented the hot reload functionality now, basically .NET wide, is a really, really nice functionality to have. And they also demoed that quite heavily at .NET Conf. And that will be, if you are a .NET developer, that will be definitely a huge quality of life and time improvement, time-saving improvement. I have been in the .NET development world since, I don't know, 2007 or 2008. And I have seen this framework, or let's call it now also platform, grow throughout now almost 15 years. And it's quite impressive where .NET has come from as a Microsoft Windows only and proprietary solution, and now being basically a complete open source solution. They actually stated at .NET Conf that .NET 6, which is now the new release that released this week with .NET Conf, is the mainline .NET release. So, of course, there will be hotfixes for the old .NET frameworks, but they are actually offering transitionary tools for developers to get their legacy projects updated to .NET 6. And that not only involves the classic Windows applications, so WinForms applications, ASP.NET, and so on, but that also is the case for cross-platform applications that have been previously built on Xamarin Forms. And .NET 6, how they demoed it during .NET Conf, reminds me a lot of how you can use React Native, basically, because now with .NET 6 and the Blazor and the .NET MAUI frameworks, you will be able to mix and match components from web, desktop, mobile, however you want it. And that it can be a huge time saver if you have a heavily connected application that uses all these different channels. So I was really impressed seeing that. Even for me, as someone who knows .NET well, .NET 6 will be a huge learning curve. And I'm looking forward to see how this technology develops in the next following years. Only that thing that I have to say is that .NET MAUI, which will be the new cross-platform UI framework, which is not yet launched. It will launch early next year. But they're delaying this especially due to quality reasons. And they're taking a lot of learnings from Xamarin Forms, and a lot of community contributions, and putting those into the core framework, which is a good thing. I actually have had it happen this week that I had an issue with a customer application where I had to find out that the library that we are using to load SVG images that has been used widely in the Xamarin Forms community in the past few years, that we used basically in all our applications, that this has not been maintained since end of 2019. And in 2020, there was a release of Xamarin Forms 5, and I had to hold back that particular application to Xamarin 4.8 due to some glitches that I was experiencing. I thought they were Xamarin related, but as it turned out, they were related to that library. And now, due to an issue with iPhone 12 and 13 mini devices, I was forced to update. And found out that this library was causing the issues. And I had to implement a fix for that. So, and thankfully, since the .NET community is really big and active, and there are a lot of samples going around, I was able to base this on 2 older articles and a component that was also out of maintenance. And I published a new open source package this week that addresses this issue, which enables proper SVG loading now from embedded resources for Xamarin Forms 5. And the customer app is back in production with those fixes since Thursday, and everything seems to be well. So I'm glad about that. And so this is an example of why putting stuff from the community into the core that is centrally managed is not always a bad thing. So that's a small side story from my experience this week. Yeah. And then we can go over to the other developer conference that we had on Friday, live streamed by Valve. And it seems like initially I got the info that it was basically invitation only, but if I read the other article here at Gaming on Linux correctly, it was always to be meant to be public. So nevertheless, my impression of watching the conference was definitely that it was targeted to developers that are not yet that familiar with Linux and especially the Steam Deck. And so the information that they presented there, however, were nevertheless very comprehensive. For me personally, not much new information, but they went into several nice details that were good new information for the community. And the article that I have up from Gaming on Linux here is basically good summary. You will find the link to that in the show notes. I am actually going to repost those in the live stream chat as well again. I posted them initially, but it has been some time, so I'm posting them. Okay, and I'm not going through all the technical details that they discussed there right now, because it was really a lot. So they went through the architecture of the Steam Deck, component choices, how everything is going to interact with each other. And one thing that really surprised me, actually, I don't know why I did not really have it on in my head correctly, but I thought that the Steam Deck would be running a Zen 3 CPU. So the current generation that is currently available for desktop and mobile. And during the presentation, I was actually confused because they showed slides that it was Zen 2. And I read it up, and yeah, it is Zen 2. So the comparable to the Ryzen 3000 processors. And yeah, we were discussing this, I think yesterday, and I checked some community conversations about that since then, and the logical explanation why AMD is using that particular architecture is that there is no Zen 3 based APU architecture at the moment. AMD is actually developing that in parallel to the Stream Deck APU, but with Vega graphics. I'm still confused why they're not developing this with RDNA 2 right away, but yeah. Probably their approach is with the Vega graphics. They are a bit more energy efficient than the RDNA 2, but I don't know really. I don't really know that. Now I'm having a Bluetooth hiccup. Audio seems to still be there, so I'm going to continue. Yeah. One other thing that during the conference that really caught my eye was that Valve is going to allow third-party stores, so launchers. They named it during the conference. It was actually also a Q&A question. But if you enable launchers from different providers, for example, the Epic launcher is also a store. So you have the ability to buy games and apps from other providers, and this intrigued me because recently I wrote an article about the whole App Store debacle. I show this one here as well. Where we currently have lawsuits between Epic Games and Apple regarding the conditions in those stores and so on and so forth. And as I wrote in this article here, for me, the most important thing in regards to what to allow on the device is the usage scope of the device. And Valve was pretty clear in their communication there, because they said the Steam Deck, first of all, is a gaming device, but it is basically a desktop, so a normal PC. So in the end, you can do whatever you want with it. Yeah, but what they're focusing on is providing the best gaming the best gaming experience first, and everything else will be second. And that's why they are also, as far as I understand, focusing primarily on getting the current catalog working through Wine and Proton on Linux, and not pushing developers to do native ports, because that lowers the barrier of entry for those developers. And once they have established this new platform as the Steam OS / Steam Deck gaming platform, then with the user base that will result out of that, then you have a lot more with missing the word. You have companies have a lot more interest in investing and developing native versions that benefit much more from the efficiencies that you have on Linux. Yeah, so we are through with all the topics that I wanted to discuss today. A lot of interesting developments going on right now, so will be interesting to see what we have in the next few weeks. So probably the next episode will be, I don't know, next week or the week after next week. Depends a bit on my personal schedule. But I will definitely announce it on the blog and also on my Twitter. So the blog is again on bnonet.com, and you can find me on Twitter at bnoffer. So these are the best two channels to see when I am actually live. And as I said initially, this podcast is now recorded as part of a live stream. And basically after this recording is concluded, I will go into a discussion / Q&A for a time. And the whole stream will afterwards be available on YouTube. Then thank you very much for listening, and hope to see you soon in the next episode. And you can find the links to the articles and topics that I discussed today on my blog. And on the YouTube video, there is a link to the show notes directly below the video. So, thank you very much, and have a good day. So, back to more leisure mode. I hope the topics were interesting. Yeah, Valve is going to talk about native development is definitely interesting. I think I mentioned that during the topic as well. And yeah, it's really interesting what's going to happen with the whole discussion and the whole development regarding Steam Deck, Linux. And I have to say, after doing my research, it's also interesting to see what impact this has for cross-platform gaming as a whole. Because, of course, you have now basically the first time, as I remember, that Apple is coming out with hardware that can properly support gaming as well. So the community that is currently building due to the new M1 Max performance is really growing, and it will be interesting to see where this is going, especially that one of the key players Valve is working with is Codeweavers, and Codeweavers is of course also a player in the Mac space with Crossover. and they're putting quite in some development time in that as well. So they now got also the Rockstar launcher working on macOS with crossover, so you can also play GTA Online and so on with the on the Mac, and they are actually working on full native libraries to do the translations till I think 2023 was the time frame they mentioned in their blog. So it's really interesting what's going to happen, and Microsoft has a lot more competition in regards to gaming now, and I think that's one reason why they're, for example, doing their Game Pass thing, because when you have a Game Pass, then you're basically bound to Windows and the Windows Store, and that's a key reason why people might not want to switch. I heard or read, I'm not sure right now, that for other games like I think it was Forza Horizon 5, the Windows launcher for that has now also been made working on Linux. So when you have the game through Steam, you can launch the game via Proton on Steam. Took the user who made that work, I think, a week, but it's now possible as well. So really the only reason why you would then have to stick to Windows is when you use Game Pass. And yeah. Okay, so only an hour in today. Yeah, correct. The Game Pass Ultimate has a streaming option, yes, but if you're just gaming on a PC, there is a Xbox Game Pass PC option, which probably most people will have, and the Ultimate version makes more sense for people who have an Xbox and a PC where they want to play the games on. And yeah, so that's definitely a factor. But yeah, it will be interesting to see how this whole space is going to develop. You have much more options, and of course, then you also have this Deckard project from Valve in regards to VR. And a lot of new headsets coming out. I saw lately a demo of a VR headset, or it's not a VR only headset. It's actually an MR headset where you can transition from VR to augmented reality, and it was really interesting to see. It's a much smaller device. I don't remember the name right now, but the devices that are coming out, that are currently being developed, they're all much smaller. And this MR device you're really mixing virtual reality and augmented reality, so you can stick your head into a, let's say, a sphere of virtual space, and you can pop out your head and you're back into basically reality. And yeah, a lot of cool stuff is coming out. Lots more developments, and of course the whole metaverse thing from Facebook is fueling that heavily. But I still want to be able to travel in person and see the world, because for me that's not something that you can replace with a virtual experience. And as nice as it can be, but the real thing you cannot replace it, basically, at least in my opinion. So okay, so if there are no additional discussion topics, I am going to call it for today. So I will be able to make the final recording that will go to YouTube later today. And yeah, it will be on YouTube, and it will be as podcast on the typical platforms: Apple Podcasts, Spreaker, Spotify, and so on and so forth. And yeah, thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you again next time when I will be streaming again for the podcast, or when I do another mixed reality stream, which will be probably on Friday. Perhaps I will do some in between, one in between earlier, but I don't know yet. So that will be a bit more spontaneous. So, Corbin, thanks for stopping by, and see you next time.